Dr. Hyun-woo Park stood in the center of the massive research facility on Station Alpha 7, watching dozens of species work together. The sight still amazed him after 15 years. Tall crystal-like velans moved between workstations with their bodies glowing soft blue. The Cortesh workers moved in perfect harmony, sharing thoughts through their hive mind. Energy beings called Nexari floated above everyone, their forms shifting like living light, and humans worked alongside them all. Hyun-woo remembered when humanity first made contact with the Galactic Council. Earth's leaders had been nervous. They worried that humans would be seen as primitive compared to these ancient civilizations. Some species in the Council had existed for thousands of years. They had technology that seemed like magic to humans, but something unexpected happened. The Council needed what humans offered. Dr. Park, the quantum readings are stable, called out engineer Minji Kim from across the lab. She was working on the latest version of the quantum stabilizer, a device that made faster-than-light travel safe and reliable. Before Minji's design, space travel between distant stars took months and was dangerous. Ships often got lost in the void between galaxies. Now the same journey took hours. Minji had started with basic council technology, but she had made it better. Much better. She understood something about quantum mechanics that even the ancient Velans had missed. Where they saw rigid rules, she saw flexible possibilities. Her stabilizers didn't just follow the laws of physics. They danced with them. Excellent work, Hyun-woo said, walking over to examine her progress. The stabilizer hummed quietly, its surface covered in symbols from 6 different languages. Human numbers mixed with Velan crystal patterns and Nexari energy signatures. This was what made their partnership special. Each species brought their own knowledge, and together they created something none could make alone. Across the station, Admiral Dong-hyun Lee was having his daily meeting with the Joint Fleet commanders. The conference room held representatives from 12 different species, but Dong-hyun had learned to speak with each one in their own way. With the logical Velans, he used facts and data. With the emotional Cortesh, he spoke about protection and unity. With the proud Nexari, he discussed honor and achievement. The Border Patrol reports are encouraging, Dong-hyun told the group. Pirate attacks have dropped by 70% in the last month. The new patrol routes are working. A Velan commander, her crystal body pulsing green with approval, responded, "Your tactical planning continues to exceed our models, Admiral. How do you predict enemy movement so accurately?" Dong-hyun smiled. "I think like they think. Each species has patterns, but they also have surprises. I watch for both." This was the human gift that amazed the Council most. Humans could understand other minds without sharing them. The Cortesh shared thoughts naturally, so they understood each other perfectly but struggled to grasp outsiders. The Velans used pure logic, which worked with other logical species but failed with emotional ones. Humans somehow bridged all these gaps. In the medical wing, Dr. Yuna Choi was putting the finishing touches on her latest translation program. The device was small enough to fit behind someone's ear, but it could translate between over 3,000 languages and dialects. More importantly, it understood context, emotion, and cultural meaning. "Testing the Relakian dialect now," Yuna said to her assistant, a young Cortesh named Hive Singer Zeph. She spoke a complex phrase in Korean, and the device translated it into the musical language of the Relakians, complete with the proper emotional undertones. Hive Singer Zeph listened carefully and nodded. The translation captures not just the words, but the feeling behind them. "How do you program emotion into a machine?" "I don't program it," Yuna explained. "I teach it to recognize patterns in how different species express feelings. Then I give it examples of how to match those patterns across languages. The machine learns to feel the meaning, not just translate the words." This was another human breakthrough that had transformed the galaxy. Before Yuna's translators, diplomatic meetings often failed because of misunderstandings. Species would agree to treaties in their own language, only to discover later that they had promised completely different things. Wars had started over translation errors. Now species could speak to each other with perfect clarity. Trade agreements became simpler. Cultural exchange flourished. The galaxy felt smaller and more connected. Council Chair Velith Prime often visited the human sections of the station. Today she found Hyun-woo in his office, reviewing reports from dozens of joint projects. "Your species continues to surprise us," Velith Prime said, her crystal form shifting to a warm amber color that indicated pleasure and curiosity. "How so?" Hyunwoo asked, looking up from his work. Every problem we bring to human scientists, you solve in ways we never considered. The Cortesh have been trying to improve their hive communication for centuries. Your team did it in 6 months. The Nexari struggled with energy coherence issues for millennia. Dr. Choi fixed it in a year. Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. We see things differently because we're new. You've been solving problems the same way for so long that you stopped seeing other possibilities. We don't know what's supposed to be impossible, so we try everything. And yet you never claim superiority, Velith Prime observed. Other species might use such success to demand higher status in the council. Why would we? Hyunwoo shrugged. We're stronger together than apart. Your people understand quantum mechanics at a level we're still learning. The Cortesh can coordinate massive projects without any confusion. The Nexari can manipulate energy in ways we can barely imagine. We're not better than you. We're different from you, and different is exactly what this galaxy needed. Velith Prime's color shifted to deep blue, indicating deep thought. Perhaps that is what makes your species so valuable. You see partnership where others see competition. As the day ended, Hyunwoo walked through the station's observation deck. Through the massive windows, he could see ships from dozens of worlds coming and going. Traders carried goods across the galaxy in hours instead of months. Diplomats traveled to solve conflicts before they became wars. Scientists shared discoveries that benefited everyone. The galaxy had never been more peaceful or prosperous. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors but as partners. They had proven that newcomers could contribute just as much as ancient civilizations. Everything seemed perfect. The future looked bright and full of promise. None of them knew that some members of the council were beginning to feel very differently about humanity's success. In secret chambers far from human eyes, older species were starting to worry about how much the galaxy had come to depend on human innovation. They were beginning to see humanity's gifts not as blessings, but as threats. The emergency alarm echoed through Station Alpha 7 at 3 in the morning. Captain Jin Ho Nam rolled out of his bed and grabbed his uniform as the red lights flashed in his quarters. Outside his window, he could see ships racing toward the edge of the system. The Devourers had returned. Jin Ho had heard stories about them, but he had never seen them in person. They were parasites from dark space, creatures that ate matter itself. When they touched a planet, they didn't just destroy life. They consumed the very atoms that made up rocks, water, and air. Entire worlds became empty voids in space. The Council had fought the Devourers for over 2,000 years. Sometimes they won battles, sometimes they lost. But they never found a way to stop them permanently. The best they could do was slow them down and evacuate planets before they arrived. Captain Nam, report to Lab 7 immediately, came Dr. Hyunwoo Park's voice over the communication system. Jin Ho ran through the corridors, passing Valans whose crystal bodies were flashing urgent red, and Cortesh workers moving in perfect formation toward their emergency stations. When Jin Ho reached Lab 7, he found the room full of scientists from every species. Dr. Yuna Choi was working at 3 different computers at once, her fingers flying over keyboards while her translation devices converted data between different scientific languages. Engineer Minji Kim stood before a massive hologram showing the approaching Devourer swarm. How bad is it? Jin Ho asked. 7 Devourer ships heading for the Caliph system, Minji replied grimly. 4 billion inhabitants. If they reach the planets, everyone dies. What about evacuation? Dr. Hyunwoo shook his head. Not enough time. The Council fleet is 6 hours away, but the Devourers will reach Caliph in 4 hours. Even if we could evacuate everyone, where would we put 4 billion refugees? Jin Ho studied the hologram. The Devourer ships looked like massive black holes with tentacles, each one big enough to swallow a moon. Traditional weapons barely scratched them. Their hulls absorbed energy blasts and grew stronger. Physical projectiles simply disappeared into their matter-eating fields. What if we don't fight them directly? Jin Ho said suddenly. What if we confuse them instead? Everyone turned to look at him. Explain, Hyunwoo said. The Devourers eat matter by breaking down atomic bonds, right? What if we could create a field that made those bonds unstable in a different way? Instead of making matter easier to eat, we make it impossible to digest. Dr. Yuna's eyes lit up. A quantum disruption field. If we could generate the right frequency, we'd need to understand how their digestive process works at the molecular level, Minji added, her mind already racing through possibilities. For the next 3 hours, the human team worked at a pace that amazed their alien colleagues. They took existing council technology and modified it in ways no one had ever attempted. Dr. Yuna rewrote quantum field equations while speaking to Velan mathematicians in their own crystal song language. Minji redesigned energy generators using principles she borrowed from Nexari power systems. Jinho coordinated with the Cortesh to manufacture new components using their hive mind precision. With 1 hour left before the Devourers reached Caliph, they had built something completely new, a quantum field generator that could make matter temporarily indigestible to Devourer technology. "Will it work?" asked Velith Prime, who had been watching the humans work with growing amazement. "We're about to find out," Jinho said as his ship launched toward the Devourer swarm. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers, Jinho's ship projected the quantum field around them. The creature's feeding tentacles touched the field and recoiled as if burned. Their matter absorption system sputtered and failed. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers retreated. The Caliph system was saved. News of the victory spread across the galaxy within hours. Humanity had done what the Council's greatest minds couldn't accomplish in 2 millennia. They had found a way to stop the Devourers, but instead of celebration, Jinho noticed something strange in the weeks that followed. Council meetings became more secretive. Human scientists found themselves excluded from certain projects. When they asked why, they were told it was for security reasons or cultural sensitivity. Ambassador So Young Han noticed it too. She had been attending council sessions for 10 years, but lately the atmosphere had changed. Representatives from older species whispered among themselves and fell silent when humans entered the room. "Something's wrong," So Young told Dr. Hyunwoo during one of their private meetings. "They're planning something and they don't want us to know about it." Hyunwoo frowned. "Planning what?" "We're partners, allies. We've given them everything we have." "Maybe that's the problem," So Young said quietly. Her suspicions proved correct when she intercepted an encrypted communication during a routine diplomatic review. The message was coded, but her translation programs were good enough to break it. What she read made her blood run cold. The Council had voted in secret to implement something called the Regulation of Advanced Innovation Protocol. The document was thick with legal language, but its meaning was clear. Humans would be restricted to junior research positions. Their access to Council technology would be limited. Their innovations would be redistributed among Council species without giving humans credit. Worst of all, human colonies would be placed under Council supervision to ensure they didn't develop technologies that might threaten galactic stability. So Young stared at the document in disbelief. After 15 years of partnership, after saving the galaxy from the Devourers, the Council saw humanity as a threat to be controlled rather than partners to be valued. She forwarded the document to every human leader in Council space. Dr. Hyunwoo read it 3 times before the reality sank in. "They're afraid of us," he said to his assembled team. "Not afraid we'll attack them, afraid we'll replace them." "What do we do?" asked Dr. Yuna. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "We ask for 72 hours to transfer our research data to Council databases. Standard procedure when changing project assignments." Minji looked confused. "But all our research is already in their databases. We've been sharing everything from the beginning." Hyunwoo smiled grimly. "That's what they think." The next morning, Hyunwoo met with Velith Prime and formally requested the 72-hour data transfer period. The Council chair's crystal body pulsed with satisfaction. "Of course," she said. "We appreciate your cooperation in this transition. The galaxy will benefit from having innovations properly managed by experienced species." "I'm sure it will," Hyunwoo replied. What Velith Prime didn't understand was that humans had been in the galaxy long enough to learn something important about their alien partners. The Velans valued logic above all else, so they assumed others thought the same way. The Corda shared everything through their hive mind, so they couldn't imagine anyone keeping secrets. The Nexari existed as pure energy, so they didn't understand the importance of physical safeguards. None of them realized that humans had been preparing for this possibility since their first day in Council space. Every human innovation contained hidden elements that only humans understood. Every collaborative project had human components that couldn't function without human oversight. Every system had been designed to work perfectly, as long as Humans remained partners rather than subordinates. The council thought they were getting 72 hours to copy human research files. What they were actually getting was 72 hours to discover how much they had underestimated humanity's gift for strategic thinking. Hyunwoo left the meeting. He sent a single encrypted message to every human in council space. The message contained only 2 words: "Come home." Across the galaxy, humans began to quietly pack their belongings and prepare for departure. They didn't argue. They didn't protest. They didn't make speeches about injustice or betrayal. They simply began to leave. And with them, they took something the council didn't even realize they possessed: the key to making everything work. Engineer Minji Kim stood in her laboratory for the last time, looking at the quantum stabilizer she had spent 3 years perfecting. The device hummed quietly on its platform, its surface glowing with soft blue light. To anyone watching, it looked like she was simply running final diagnostics before handing the technology over to the council. They had no idea what she was really doing. Minji's fingers moved carefully across her control panel, entering commands that looked like routine maintenance procedures. But each command was actually removing tiny pieces of code that only she understood. The stabilizer would still work for a while. The council would be able to use it exactly as they had before. But without the adaptive learning protocols that Minji had quietly embedded in every system, the device would slowly lose its ability to handle unexpected situations. "Transfer complete," she said to the Velan observer who had been assigned to watch her work. "The stabilizer is ready for independent operation." The Velan's crystal body pulsed green with satisfaction. "Excellent. The council appreciates your cooperation during this transition." Minji nodded and gathered her personal belongings. As she walked toward the door, she paused and looked back at the stabilizer one more time. "Take good care of it," she said quietly. The Velan didn't understand the sadness in her voice. Across the station, Dr. Yuna Choi was making similar preparations in the linguistics department. Her universal translators had become so essential to galactic communication that most species had forgotten how difficult it used to be to talk to each other. The devices seemed simple enough. Just put one in your ear and you could understand anyone. But Yuna knew the truth. The translators didn't just convert words from one language to another. They interpreted context, emotional undertones, cultural references, and unspoken meanings. They could tell the difference between a Cortesh expressing concern and a Cortesh expressing threat. Even though both emotions produced identical verbal patterns, they understood when a Velan was being polite versus when they were being dismissive, despite using the same logical phrases. This understanding came from something Yuna called empathy algorithms, programs that had learned to recognize emotional patterns by studying how humans interacted with different species. The translators worked so well because they had been taught to think like humans when interpreting alien emotions. As Yuna removed the empathy algorithms from the translator databases, she felt like she was taking away the galaxy's ability to truly understand itself. The devices would still translate words, but they would lose the subtle emotional intelligence that made real communication possible. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her computer as she deleted years of work, "but they made this choice, not us." In the command center, Admiral Dong-hyun Lee was having his final briefing with the Joint Fleet commanders. On the surface, everything seemed normal. He reviewed patrol schedules, discussed supply routes, and updated tactical assessments. But hidden beneath each routine report was a farewell. "The automated defense grid is functioning at optimal levels," Dong-hyun told the assembled commanders. "All patrol routes have been programmed into the navigation systems. The fleet should be able to maintain current operations indefinitely." What he didn't mention was that the automated systems weren't really automated at all. They required constant human judgment to work properly. The defense grid could identify potential threats, but it needed human intuition to distinguish between a merchant ship with a broken transponder and a pirate vessel trying to hide its identity. The patrol routes were efficient, but only because humans adjusted them daily, based on subtle political changes that machines couldn't detect. The tactical systems could calculate the best response to any military situation, but they relied on human understanding of alien psychology to predict enemy behavior. Without human oversight, the systems would make increasingly poor decisions until they failed completely. After the briefing, Donghyun walked through the command center one last time. He had spent 8 years building relationships with officers from dozens of species. He had learned their customs, understood their fears, and earned their trust. Now he was leaving them to face an uncertain future without the bridge-building skills that had kept the peace for so long. Dr. Sujin Kang was working late in the medical research lab, ostensibly preparing her nanotechnology systems for transfer to council control. The tiny medical robots she had designed could repair damaged organs, fight diseases, and extend lifespans across multiple species. Each type of robot was specially calibrated for different alien biologies, but the calibration process required more than just technical knowledge. It required understanding how different species experienced pain, healing, and recovery. The nanobots that worked on Valen crystal matrices were completely different from those that functioned in Cortesh hive minds, and both were different from the ones that helped Nexari energy beings maintain their coherence. Sujin had spent years learning not just the biology of different species, but their psychology of health and illness. She understood that Valens needed logical explanations for their treatment, while Cortesh required emotional reassurance. The nanobots were programmed to provide both medical care and the type of comfort each species needed. As she removed the psychological comfort protocols from the nanobots, Sujin knew she was condemning thousands of patients to receive technically correct but emotionally devastating medical care. The robots would still heal bodies, but they would no longer understand minds. Captain Woo Jin Park was preparing his ship for departure from the orbital docking station. His vessel was one of hundreds of human ships scattered throughout Council space, and each one contained systems that were far more sophisticated than they appeared. The Council had been given complete technical specifications for human spacecraft, but they had missed the most important components. Human ships were designed to be intuitive. Their control systems adapted to each pilot's preferred style of flying. Their navigation computers learned to anticipate problems before they occurred. Their communication arrays automatically adjusted to account for the emotional state of whoever was speaking. Most importantly, human ships were designed to work together. They could coordinate complex maneuvers without constant radio communication, because their computers had learned to predict what other human pilots would do in any situation. This silent coordination had made human fleets incredibly effective in both combat and peacekeeping operations. As Woo Jin removed the learning algorithms from his ship's systems, he realized he was taking away the galaxy's ability to maintain the delicate coordination that had prevented wars for 15 years. Researcher Yoon-hee Song stood in the main computer center, surrounded by servers that contained 15 years of collaborative research. Her job was supposedly to ensure that all human contributions were properly archived and distributed to Council scientists. In reality, she was performing the most complex deletion operation in galactic history. The problem wasn't that humans had hidden their research from the Council. Everything had been shared openly and honestly. The problem was that human research was fundamentally different from how other species approach science. Council species tended to specialize. Valens were excellent mathematicians but poor engineers. Cortesh were perfect coordinators but terrible innovators. Nexari understood energy but struggled with matter. Each species contributed their expertise to collaborative projects and expected others to do the same. Humans didn't work that way. They were generalists who could understand multiple disciplines well enough to see connections that specialists missed. A human physicist might also understand biology well enough to apply physics principles to medical problems. A human engineer might know enough about psychology to design machines that worked intuitively with alien minds. This interdisciplinary thinking was what made human contributions so valuable, but it also made them impossible to separate into neat categories. When Yoon-hee removed the human elements from the research databases, she wasn't just deleting human work. She was removing the connections that held different fields of knowledge together. As the 72 hours drew to a close, ships began departing from stations across the galaxy. There were no dramatic announcements or angry speeches. Humans simply packed their belongings, submitted their final reports, and left. Dr. Hyunwoo Park was among the last to go. He walked through Station Alpha 7 one final time, remembering 15 years of discoveries and friendships. In the observation deck, he found Velith Prime watching the departing human ships. "I don't understand," she said, her crystal body flickering with confusion. Why are they all leaving? The transition doesn't require mass departure. Hyunwoo looked out at the stars where human ships were disappearing into faster-than-light travel. Because you asked us to be junior partners in our own innovations, he said quietly. And we've never been good at being anyone's junior partners. But the galaxy needs your contributions, Velith Prime protested. Your innovations have transformed everything. Yes, they have, Hyunwoo agreed. The question is whether you'll still think that when you realize what we actually contributed. He handed Velith Prime a datapad containing his final report and walked away. The report looked routine. Council Chair Velith Prime stood before the assembled representatives of 47 galactic species, her crystal body glowing with confident satisfaction. The great chamber of the council was fuller than it had been in years, with delegates eager to witness the beginning of what she called traditional galactic governance. Today marks a new chapter in our shared history, Velith Prime announced, her voice echoing through the vast hall.
We have successfully transitioned away from dependence on human innovation.
Our species can now return to the proven methods that sustained the galaxy for millennia before humanity's arrival. Applause filled the chamber. The ancient Valens pulsed with approval. The cortege sang harmonious songs of unity. The Nexari flickered with bright, celebratory energy. After 15 years of watching humans solve every problem and lead every breakthrough, the council felt ready to reclaim their rightful place as the galaxy's leaders. That was 3 days ago. Now, Velith Prime stood in the same chamber, but the mood had changed completely. Report on the trade route situation, she said to Commander Zeth-9, a Velan logistics coordinator. Zeth-9's crystal body flickered nervously between blue and red. The quantum stabilizers are experiencing cascade failures across multiple systems. 17 trade routes have been suspended due to ships getting lost in quantum space. The Corrales-Venth commercial passage, which normally handles 3,000 ships per day, hasn't had a successful transit in 48 hours. Velith Prime's glow dimmed. Explain the technical cause. The stabilizers appear to be forgetting how to handle unusual situations. When they encounter unexpected quantum fluctuations, they default to basic safety protocols instead of adapting. Ships that would have completed their journey safely under human oversight are now being diverted to emergency stations. In the audience, Council member Cortesh Prime Singer raised a concern through their species' shared communication system. Our hive reports similar problems with translation systems. Diplomatic communications are becoming increasingly difficult. The Nexari representative, a being of pure energy called Bright Thought Ascending, added their own observation. Our people have noticed that the universal translators no longer understand emotional context. Yesterday, our ambassador to the Rilakian Empire accidentally declared war when he meant to express friendly greetings. The translator rendered his peaceful words as a battle challenge. Velith Prime felt a chill of concern, but she maintained her composed demeanor. These are temporary adjustment issues. Our technical teams will resolve them quickly. But the problems didn't resolve quickly. They got worse. By the end of the first week, the faster-than-light communication network had begun failing. The quantum resonance transmitters that allowed instant messages across the galaxy started producing garbled signals. Planets that had been in constant contact for 15 years suddenly found themselves isolated, unable to coordinate trade, defense, or diplomacy. On the planet Zerion 7, the Velan colony administrator Crystal Song Harmony was struggling to understand why her world's defense systems had stopped working properly. The automated sentries that protected the planet from space pirates were still functional, but they had begun attacking merchant vessels and letting obvious threats pass through undetected. The identification protocols seemed to be degrading, reported her chief engineer. The sensors can detect ships, but they can't tell the difference between a grain transport and a military cruiser. Crystal Song Harmony studied the technical reports with growing confusion. The defense systems were built on solid Velan engineering principles. The hardware was perfect. The software followed logical algorithms. Everything should have worked flawlessly. What she didn't understand was that the systems had relied on human-designed pattern recognition, software that learned to identify threats by studying pilot behavior rather than just ship classifications. A grain transport piloted by nervous pirates moved differently than one operated by legitimate traders. A military cruiser on a peaceful mission had different energy signatures than one preparing for combat. The human software had taught the defense systems to read these subtle behavioral patterns. Without human maintenance, that ability was slowly fading away. Similar problems were emerging across the galaxy. The Cortesh homeworld was experiencing coordination breakdowns that their hive mind had never encountered before. The shared mental network that allowed billions of individuals to work as one was still intact, but their ability to coordinate with other species had collapsed. Hive singer Deep Harmony tried to explain the problem to the council emergency session. Our people can still communicate perfectly among ourselves, but we can no longer understand the thought patterns of other species. When we work with Valens or Nixari, our coordination becomes chaotic. Projects that should take days are taking weeks. The issue was that human researchers had created translation protocols that helped the Cortesh hive mind interface with individual-minded species. These protocols had become so seamlessly integrated into Cortesh society that they had forgotten they existed. Now, without human maintenance, the protocols were failing. The Nixari were facing even more serious problems. Bright Thought Ascending reported that several of their people had begun losing coherence. The energy patterns that held their consciousness together were becoming unstable. Our medical systems can detect the coherence decay, but they cannot prevent it. Bright Thought Ascending explained, their energy form flickering with distress. The stabilization technology appears to be malfunctioning. Dr. Velkoth, the Council's chief medical researcher, reviewed the Nexari medical systems with growing alarm. The technology was incredibly sophisticated, using quantum field manipulation to maintain the delicate energy balance that kept Nexari consciousness stable. But embedded within the quantum algorithms were subroutines that seemed to serve no obvious purpose. What Velkoth didn't realize was that those useless subroutines were based on human understanding of consciousness and identity. Human researchers had studied how different species experienced self-awareness, and they had used that knowledge to create medical systems that could treat not just physical symptoms but psychological ones as well. The Nexari weren't just losing energy coherence, they were losing their sense of self. And without human psychological insights built into their medical systems, the technology couldn't address the mental components of their condition. By the second week, the Council was facing a galaxy-wide crisis. Trade had ground to a halt as ships became unable to navigate safely between systems. Diplomatic relations were breaking down as translation errors led to constant misunderstandings. Military conflicts were erupting as defense systems failed to distinguish between threats and peaceful visitors. Council member Nex 7, one of the most senior Nexari representatives, called for an emergency analysis of all human-influenced technologies. The investigation team included the best technical minds from every council species. They worked around the clock to understand why systems that had functioned perfectly for years were suddenly failing. Their conclusion was devastating. The humans didn't just contribute technology, Nex H7 reported to the council. They contributed a way of thinking about technology. Every system they touched was designed to adapt, learn, and evolve. More importantly, every system was designed to bridge the gap between species with fundamentally different ways of understanding the universe. The report continued with growing urgency. Human innovations work because they understand something we have forgotten, that technology must serve minds, not just bodies. Our species each excel in different areas, but we struggle to communicate across those differences. Humans created technologies that could translate not just between languages, but between ways of thinking. Velith Prime studied the report with mounting horror. Are you saying that our systems are failing because they were designed by humans? No, Nex 7 replied. Our systems are failing because they were designed to work with humans. Every major innovation of the past 15 years requires human intuition to function properly. Without humans to maintain them, adapt them, and guide them, these technologies are slowly reverting to their basic functions. The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. The Council hadn't become dependent on human technology, they had become dependent on the human ability to make technology work for diverse minds. The quantum stabilizers didn't just need technical maintenance. They needed human intuition to handle unexpected situations. The translation systems didn't just need software updates. They needed human empathy to understand emotional context. The defense systems didn't just need hardware repairs. They needed human pattern recognition to identify real threats. Everything the galaxy had come to depend on had been quietly guided by human thinking. And now that guidance was gone. As reports of failures poured in from across the galaxy, Velith Prime faced a terrible realization. The Council had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had driven away the one species that could make everything work together, and the humans had been so thorough in their departure that there might be no way to fix what had been broken. The golden age of galactic civilization was ending, not with a bang, but with the slow. 6 months after the human exodus, Emergency Coordinator Hesh Prime stood on the bridge of the Council's fastest remaining ship, staring at the debris field that had once been the beautiful trading station of Nexus Point 7. The massive structure, which had connected 12 different trade routes, had simply fallen apart when its human-designed coordination systems failed. Behind him, the skeleton crew of Velens, Cortesh, and Nexari worked desperately to keep their own ship functioning. Every few hours another system would malfunction, requiring emergency repairs with whatever spare parts they could find. The quantum stabilizer was held together with improvised components from 3 different species technologies. It worked barely, but each jump through hyperspace might be their last. Status report, Hesh Prime requested, though he dreaded the answer. The Caliph system has fallen to the Devourers, reported Navigator Christone Silver, her crystal body dim with exhaustion. Without Captain Jin Ho Nam's quantum disruption fields, our defenses were useless. 4 billion lives lost. Hesh Prime closed his eyes. The Devourers had returned exactly as expected, but the weapon that had saved Caliph the first time no longer worked. The Council's best scientists had tried to recreate Jin Ho's quantum field technology, but they had only managed to build pale imitations that failed when they encountered real Devourer ships. The Vegan Trade Republic has declared independence from the Council, added Communications Officer Hive Song Lament. They claim our leadership has become incompetent. 17 other systems are considering similar actions. The galactic government that had ruled for thousands of years was disintegrating. Without reliable, faster-than-light communication, the Council couldn't coordinate responses to crises. Without effective translation systems, diplomatic negotiations ended in confusion and anger. Without adaptive defense networks, pirates and raiders had grown bold, attacking trade routes and colonies with impunity. Most devastating of all, the species of the Council were beginning to retreat into isolation. The Velans had withdrawn to their crystal worlds, focusing on logical solutions that didn't require cooperation with emotional species. The Cortesh had turned inward, strengthening their hive-mind connections while abandoning efforts to work with individual-minded aliens. The Nexari had begun avoiding physical contact with other species, retreating into pure energy forms that couldn't interface with solid matter technology. "Sir," Navigation Officer Vel Deep Thought called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the border of human space." Hesh Prime straightened. For 6 months, every attempt to contact humanity had been met with silence. Human space had become a dark region on galactic maps with no ships entering or leaving. Some Council members had begun to wonder if humanity had simply vanished entirely. "Put it through," Hesh Prime ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing a human in a crisp uniform that Hesh Prime didn't recognize. The human looked older than he remembered humans being. His hair was gray and his face showed lines of stress and determination. "This is Director Taemin. You of the Human Independent Territories," the human said. "You are approaching our border in a Council vessel. State your purpose." Hesh Prime stepped forward. "Director Yu, I am Emergency Coordinator Hesh Prime of the Galactic Council. We request permission to enter human space for urgent diplomatic negotiations." Taemin's expression didn't change. "The Council expelled humanity from galactic affairs 6 months ago. We are no longer members of your organization. What business could we possibly have with each other?" "Director, the galaxy is collapsing," Hesh Prime said, abandoning diplomatic protocol in his desperation. "Our communication networks have failed. Trade routes are unusable. Entire systems are falling to pirates and Devourers. We need your help." For a long moment, Taemin was silent. When he spoke, his voice was cold but not angry. "You need our help now. Where was that need when you voted to restrict our research and limit our contributions?" "We made a mistake," Hesh Prime admitted. We were afraid of becoming too dependent on human innovation. We thought we could manage galactic affairs using traditional methods. And how has that worked out for you? Hesh Prime looked around his failing ship, at the exhausted alien crew, at the reports of dying worlds and collapsing governments. It hasn't worked at all. Taman nodded slowly. You may enter our space with one ship. No weapons, no recording devices, no data collection equipment. You will be escorted to a neutral meeting facility. If you attempt any aggressive actions, you will be destroyed immediately. The transmission ended, leaving Hesh Prime staring at the dark screen. After a few minutes, 3 human ships appeared nearby, sleek, advanced vessels that moved with perfect coordination. They looked nothing like the ships humans had used 6 months ago. The escort led them deeper into human space, and what Hesh Prime saw shocked him beyond words. Human stations and colonies had expanded dramatically, but more importantly, they had evolved. The architecture was more elegant, the energy signatures more efficient, the coordination between different installations absolutely flawless. How did they advance so quickly? Whispered Navigator Christone Silver. The answer became clear when they reached the meeting station. Humans had taken everything they had learned during 15 years in the galaxy and accelerated it beyond anything the Council had imagined possible, without the need to design systems that worked with dozens of different alien mindsets. Humans had been free to create technology that perfectly matched human thinking. Their ships moved like schools of fish, coordinating through intuitive understanding rather than complex communication protocols. Their stations were works of art that functioned with impossible efficiency. Their defense systems could distinguish between threats and friends with almost supernatural accuracy. Director Timon Yu met them in a simple conference room, but even the furniture showed human advancement. The chairs adapted automatically to each alien physiology. The lighting adjusted to what each species found comfortable. The air was perfectly filtered for every type of respiratory system. Please sit, Taman said, gesturing to the adaptive chairs. Tell me exactly what kind of help you think humanity can provide. Hesh Prime sat carefully, amazed at how the chair supported his crystalline structure perfectly. We need technical advisors, people who understand how to maintain the systems you created. Without human oversight, everything is failing. Everything you built based on our designs, Taman corrected. Everything we actually created is working perfectly. What do you mean? Taman touched a control panel and the room's walls became transparent, showing the view outside. Hesh Prime could see Council refugees, individual aliens who had fled the collapsing galaxy, working alongside humans in the station's corridors. They wore the same uniforms as the humans and moved with the same confident efficiency. We didn't abandon everyone, Taman explained. When individuals from Council species asked to join us as equals, we welcomed them. Dr. Velkoth is now our chief xenobiology researcher. Former Council Admiral Nexari Bright Ascending leads our energy systems division. Over 50,000 aliens have become full citizens of the human independent territories. But what about the rest of us? Hesh Prime asked. What about the billions of beings still in Council space? Taman's expression hardened. What about them? The Council voted to reduce humanity to junior partners in our own innovations. You decided that ancient civilizations knew better than newcomers. You chose traditional methods over collaborative progress. We were wrong, Hesh Prime said desperately. We see that now. The galaxy needs human thinking, human innovation, human understanding of how different minds work together. Yes, it does, Taman agreed. But the galaxy chose to reject those things. You didn't want partners. You wanted servants who would create wonderful technologies and then step aside while others took credit. Hesh Prime looked around the room at his exhausted crew, then back at Taman. What would it take for humanity to help us? Nothing, Taman said simply. Nothing? You can't offer us anything we need. We have better technology, more efficient government, stronger defenses, and more advanced science than the galaxy we left behind. We have everything the Council could provide, and we have it without the politics, prejudice, and fear that made our previous partnership impossible. Timon stood and walked to the transparent wall, looking out at the bustling station. For 15 years, humans proved our worth by helping others. We solved your problems, improved your technologies, and made your lives better. We did this because we believed in partnership and cooperation. He turned back to Hesh Prime. You taught us that partnership requires mutual respect. When that respect disappeared, so did the partnership. But surely you won't let entire civilizations collapse just because of political mistakes. Hesh Prime protested. "We're not letting anything happen," Taman replied. "You are experiencing the natural consequences of your own choices. You wanted to govern the galaxy using traditional methods. You're getting exactly what you asked." The meeting continued for hours, but the outcome never changed. Humanity had moved beyond the galaxy that had rejected them. They had built something better, something that didn't require the endless compromises and conflicts that had marked galactic politics for millennia.